Welcome to Guardians of the Data. I'm your host, Ward Balzerzak. Each episode will explore the passions, expertise, and real-world experiences of security leaders who are helping the future of data security and governance. Guardians of the Data is made possible by support from Centra. To learn more about our AI-powered data security platform, please visit centra.io. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of Guardians of the Data. I'm your host, Ward Balzerzak. Today's guest is a technology-driven leader, engineer, and advisor. He has almost 20 years of experience across multiple industries and currently the field CTO at Infolock. Kraig Faulkner, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ward. Happy to be here. It's a cool day here in Colorado today.
I'm really excited to have you here. Let's jump right in. Are you ready?
Let's do it. Excited.
Perfect. In your professional opinion, what's the biggest challenge that organizations are facing when it comes to data security?
You know, there's a little bit of a loaded question, Ward. However, I'm going to go down a path that, obviously listening to past episodes and something that I talk about and is near and dear to my heart almost every day is AI, artificial intelligence. However, I'm going to take a little spin on it. I'm not a data scientist, right? I don't claim to be somebody that can go and build you an LLM. However, I do know about data, and I know that data that's accessed through an LLM and through these GPTs that we have access to now is concerning for a lot of customers, right? And so I really want to focus today on access of specifically generative AI, right? I think that us being able to understand what access looks like and what good looks like for access is pretty critical. So that's really where I want to start. I think that AI access is definitely a big issue that we need to dive deeper into.
I love that you're taking a spin, Kraig, because, I can actually hear it through the internet, even though we haven't posted this yet. I can hear everybody groaning that's listening. Oh, God, another AI talk, right? Because I'm sure you've seen it, right? I was at a conference last week. Every vendor, every customer, every talk has those two letters in it. AI this, AI that. Love the spin, though, because access is really foundational, and I don't know that anybody knows where to start and how to solve it. So how do you recommend folks start this journey of understanding that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing and part of what we do here at Infolock is really understanding what the business risk is of particular data sets, right? So, first and foremost, understand what your data is and for a industry term, what are those crown jewels, right? What are you actually trying to protect? What do you want to not leave? Because that's really critical in understanding what that data estate looks like. And so being able to understand that data and then ultimately how it ties to the business and how it impacts what the business does, right? I think we get so siloed sometimes from a security perspective that we're trying to secure everything and lock everything down without understanding how it impacts the business, right? And so being able to really go through and understand what finance is doing, what HR is doing, what operations is doing, what IT is doing, and how they're leveraging that data, because it's going to give us an understanding of who actually needs access, right? First and foremost, and then moving on to how do we now grant that access, right? So I really think, unfortunately, it can be a little slow to understand this sometimes just because we've got to really get ingrained with the business unit leaders, right? Understand what that data looks like and then be able to apply those controls. So that's the first step in my mind, is really understanding the business and how it ties to the business, how that particular data ties to the business. I think a lot of times we just overlook that. And if we really understand it, we're going to be able to secure it much better.
And that can be daunting, right? Businesses come in various shapes, sizes, flavors, within their various use cases. I've had this conversation multiple times, in the practitioner seat of what are my personas, right? Who's out there? And, unfortunately, people can have multiple personas. So, I mean, right? Like, hey, I'm wearing this hat, but now I'm wearing this hat, and now I'm wearing this hat on this project. It's temporal, right? It's for this particular amount of time.
Right.
I'm going to assume you're not recommending customers, clients to boil the ocean, right? I'm going to assume one of your first recommendations is start somewhere. So how do you lead them to taking those first bites, right? What is your rules of thumb there?
Yeah. So one is, some sort of governing body, right? Being able to establish a governing body that helps drive those decisions. Again, being able to bring in those business stakeholders to be able to help understand what that whole data estate looks like and how it's going to be used. Because again, we're security, we're siloed, right? We're not going to understand the impact that all data has on how it's being used in the business, right? So bringing everybody together and getting everybody to have a seat at the table, right? I think we've said for a long time that everybody's security, right? Like every human that's interacting with a machine, you are now security. It should be the forefront of your mind. That hasn't always gone that well for everyone, right? People have jobs to do, right? Multiple personas, as you said, right? And so security is not always the front of everybody's mind, especially just your normal average worker, right? So if we can bring in business unit leaders that actually understand what that business unit's doing and how it impacts their users and that productivity, that's really how we, really bring them in and lead them through that, because then they're all getting a chance to voice their opinion, their fact, their business unit purpose, all of those things. And it really brings everybody together for one common purpose: to not allow this data to leave our enterprise, right? The second step, I think, is really, like I said at the beginning, is understanding that data. So once we have buy-in from those stakeholders, then we can actually start analyzing what that data looks like, right? And you said it, took the words out of my mouth. We don't want to boil the ocean. Let's start with a subset. Most of the time, we have a pretty good idea of where those crown jewels sit. Let's start there, right? Let's understand what those crown jewels are, how they're impacted. Let's take security protocol into place, whether that's, doing a scan or applying a tag or some sort of policy to prevent exfiltration, right? And those things come along as we build out the program, right? But ultimately, being able to understand that data and then have that business unit buy-in is absolutely critical to the success of a program around data security.
I love it. And I want to go to a word you've said a few times now, exfiltration. And it's a fun word. I love using it, right? Coming again, going back years ago when data security was DLP, right? Data loss prevention. So exfiltration was the name of the game. Where I've often had difficulty with business areas, even fellow security and IT folks, is defining what is internal, air quotes, versus what is external, right? And folks will say, "Oh, well, we own a license with Salesforce, for example. So we're going to say that that is internal, even though it's not actually internal." So in the world of AI and, with what you're talking about here, exfiltration, how are you getting folks to understand, yes, right? You have this licensing, hopefully. Um, that's not actually internal, folks, or maybe it is. Maybe they're building something internal. How are you really framing that up when it comes to data security?
Yeah, so obviously there's a big piece you mentioned there with the cloud, right? If we talk about SaaS applications, right? I think we're going back in time a little bit from a talk track perspective around security, because if you think about a decade or so ago, Cloud Access Security Broker, CASB, right? Unsanctioned and sanctioned apps. Like, we can control who can do what with apps that we approve of. It's now going to apply that same kind of methodology to AI. Who has access to certain data sets to be able to then pull answers through, specifically like a generative AI, right? A GPT. Because at the end of the day, those LLMs, those large language models, are using that data to then answer questions that are asked of it, right? And so what happens is, yes, you may think that all of this data is yours, and it probably is. And you could have a lot of security controls to understand that this data is ours, it resides here, and we know that it's being used to help aid the LLM. The issue that we come across is now everyone has access to that data. So if we kind of look back at how we've gotten here, right? If we look at, drives of yesteryear, right, where you had access to a shared drive internally in a data center, now to things like SharePoint, OneDrive, G Suite, we have what's called role-based access control, right? Dependent on what you do and what you need to do for your job, you have access to certain files, folders, drives, all of that. Unfortunately, that's not what's happening when it comes to generative AI. We're going and turning this on, and now everyone can go and essentially ask questions of all of that data. So now people are getting access to things they normally wouldn't, i.e., financial information, HR information, PII, PHI, PC, all the buzzwords, right? That's all accessible to anyone. All they have to do is query a GPT. I'm not going to call one out, right? Because there's many of them out there, right? There's many stories out there and examples of this, and we're hearing more and more. One that, you and Ward, I have talked about is being able to essentially ask a GPT, where's my name in the company? And if you do that, what happens? It literally returns every result of where your name resides, up to and including financial information, HR, all of that stuff. So now someone could literally just go and query someone else's name and find all of that information, right? And so we get back to that word of exfiltration. I think when people think exfiltration, they think a bad guy coming in and taking that data and it leaving. Insider risk, insider threat is just as much of an issue with data, especially now introducing AI and the access that people have to it, of taking that information and using it maliciously, right? So-and-so gets paid more than I do. How do you know that? Well, I went and asked insert GPT and it told me that they get paid more than I do, right? Like, it's very simple now for people to get information that they otherwise shouldn't or wouldn't have access to. So that's what I really mean by exfiltration.
I think that's a great definition, and I totally agree with the whole insider piece. Insider risk, insider threat's been a part of my job, and what you just described was one of those personas, which could be the disgruntled insider, right? And
Yeah.
instead of the water cooler talk of, oh, I make $25 an hour. Well, shucks, I make 18. What's going on? Like, it's super simple. Just GPT, Kraig, oh my goodness, Kraig's making so much more than me, and now I'm gonna be mad about it, right? Totally with you. It's making it a lot easier for folks to get that information.
Yeah, I just had another thought as you were saying that. Let's think about a publicly traded company. Now you're getting access to potentially pre IPO information, pre earnings information. Now people are going to go and sell their stock because they know that, the quarter was bad, whatever the case may be, right? There's so many things that you can glean from information that, again, you otherwise wouldn't normally have access to.
Yeah, actually, I really have not thought about that particular use case. I had thought of like investing models when you think about like insurance companies out there. That's really how they make their money typically is investments, and most companies those are highly restricted models. But interesting, yeah, you could get access to, meeting minutes, you can get access to emails, M&A activity could be something that, not everyone's, privy to. Very interesting. So, I mean, we might be scaring the audience a little bit, right? Things they also haven't thought of. They might be saying, "Oh, shoot, like, yeah, that relates to me." What are the next steps for those folks? Where do they go from being scared to starting to fix this problem?
Yeah, just give me a call. I'm just kidding. I can't solve the world's problems, but we definitely, there's help, right? And there's help to be able to get your arms around it. Uh, I think the first step, a lot of times, I think in security, our first step is let's get a tool. I don't think that that's the answer here. A lot of times there's already a tool that exists, right? There's the ability to do some access control within your licensing that you have for said Gen AI tool, whether that's part of your workspace suite or, something separate, right? But being able to really understand, like I said in the beginning, who has access, because then once we understand that, we can start putting those guardrails in place. But before we put the guardrails in place, we got to understand it, right? It's that cart before the horse, chicken before the egg thing, right? And I think a lot of people want AI, and AI can be really good, right? It can be used for a lot of good things. I use it for a lot of really good things. But my concern is around that access to that data, right? Because we have to be sure that what it's producing and giving back to us is accurate and it's valid, right? What's the phrase they say? Everything on the internet's true. We know that's not real, right? Um, so it's the same thing in AI. Like we have to understand that, a human effectively built this. It's learning on its own of how to then go give response back to a person, right? So that's the other kind of piece of it is, how do we know that this data is even good, right? So I think the big first step is really analyzing that data, just understanding that data, taking a small subset like we talked about. What is this data? Why do we have this data? Is this data even relevant to the business anymore? We could start going down a deletion policy path, right? Like you don't need to keep 20 years of records, right? Like let's bring that into something that's manageable, 5 years, 7 years, something that we know is relevant to the business. Likely something that's 20 years old is probably not very relevant to the business anymore because things change in every industry, right? So cleanup is a big one, right? Understanding that access, where it resides, where it needs to reside, because that's another big piece too is, has somebody just put this data here because they thought it should go there? But is that really where it should go? Is that really the repository that has the controls in place that we need it to have, right? So I definitely don't think it's a tool conversation. I think it is a conversation around, sitting at a table with the stakeholders, understanding why they have the data they have, and ultimately who has access to it. And then being able to go from that level and then start narrowing it down and really creating that funnel of how do we get the output we want? What is the outcome we're trying to achieve here, right? And for me, the outcome is not giving people the access that they shouldn't have, right? So
You're bringing up a lot of fundamentals, right? AI is relatively new. I know it's been out for years, but when we call it relatively new, that the problem feels like it's getting bigger and bigger. But part of what you're laying out as solving this problem are fundamentals we've been talking about for years. You mentioned should data even be in that location, that repository? Thinking back a handful of roles ago, I was going through an initiative to have classification based storage, right? Let's not commingle our public with our restricted data. Let's have restricted data here, confidential, internal, public, so on and so forth. So, based on what you just said, sounds like very, very relevant still for, securing AI.
very much so. And I think that we as a security industry, we have gotten so fascinated with what's new, what's hot, what's moving the needle, as you say, right? And we forget about some of the basics, right? A lot of this around data, and me and a lot of people in my circle talk about frequently, what is it that we're trying to prevent with all of these tools, right? There's a myriad of tools in a security stack. At the end of the day, what are we trying to do? We're trying to prevent the bad guys from getting access to that data, right? So I think it really is a basics conversation. And it's not that I'm trying to be rudimentary by any means. It's more of a refresher, right? And for me too, I think that we all need a refresher at times. We all learn very differently as adults than we did as kids. And I think that now it just takes a little bit of a, knocking on the head sometimes, if you will, to be able to get people to really get behind it and understand that this really is what's best, is what's best for business. We're not trying to, prevent you from doing your job. At the end of the day, I want user productivity to be better than it ever has been. But how do we do that securely? And you're right. It really is taking some things really back to the basics. I mean, RBAC. I don't know that I've said RBAC that much in the last few years, but I think it's becoming really relevant again, right? Because now people have access they shouldn't have.
Yeah, funny you say that because I was going to go back to RBAC as well, and in your statement there, I did a talk about a month ago now. The talk is around zero trust, but a lot of my talk was about the convergence, or really the necessity of zero trust plus data security. And I didn't say it directly, but there's that third piece Obviously that's there, which is identity, and not just RBAC. Oh, I've got this AD group that's got access to this shared location. It's a true identity. You are Ward, you are this position, you do these things. It's really bringing in kind of the HR aspect to that. When you deal with a client, customer, or what have you, again, that's going down this journey, and you start talking about these things and maybe realize they don't have what you would think are the appropriate processes, governance, what have you. Where do you have them start when it comes to the identity and access piece?
I mean, first is going to be kind of a, not to use a buzzword, but an audit, right? Like, let's understand where these even reside and who they are, and are they legitimate, right? The other piece of that comes into this, though, is agentic AI, right? Where we now have personas that are AI. So that's going to be a whole nother thing that I won't go super deep on, but we're definitely starting to brush the surface of it rather quickly. Um, but yeah, really understanding and validate who those identities are. Again, it comes back to kind of that deletion thing. What is our process for HR? Again, how are we involving HR as a stakeholder and understanding what this even looks like? Um, there's a lot of automation leverage now when it comes to tasks like that, right? Employee onboarding and offboarding. Um, those are critical aspects of making sure that this data is where it needs to be and that doesn't go stale and people don't continue to have access to it, right? Um, I think that's kind of the big piece is really understanding that audit, right? How do we know who has what, when, why, where, all those letters, right? That we learned when we were kids. Because once we understand that, then we can really go and start applying logic, right? So I really started asking customers pretty simple questions. Who has access? Why do they have access? Right? Um, those two questions usually go pretty far, right? A lot of times I just ask why and see what response is, right? Because based on what the response is, then I can kind of pivot and go to where we need to go from there. Because everybody's on a different maturity scale, everybody's got different tooling. So, how do we really understand this programmatically? And that's really being able to involve those stakeholders and understand really what the business looks like. Because if we don't understand the business, in all honesty, I don't think we can effectively secure the business. Maybe that's a really bold statement to say, but
No, I think that's accurate. And I always when you were a kid, it was super annoying as a parent, right? Where your child would say, why over and over. I found that to actually be effective, or a flavor of that in dealing with the business, right? To your point, first, what is your data? Okay. Um, who has access to it? Okay. Why? You get an answer. Okay, well, why? You get another answer. And you keep digging down, and eventually, hopefully, you get to the bottom line of here's what it is. Hopefully it's like, two whys deep and not 15, but you really go down that why wormhole to figure it out, and bring it all back to an AI initiative. It really helps you frame up not only the access, but the security measures around it.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Again, and back to that tooling conversation, right? Because then now we can start talking about how tools impact our ability to actually go and make this successful. But at the beginning, a lot of it is somewhat theoretical, right? Until we understand the data. So,
So I want to go back. You mentioned CASB, a blast from the past.
yeah.
CASB, it's not going away, but you use terms that I've really enjoyed using over the years, which is sanctioned versus unsanctioned. Um,
Yes.
in my opinion, very applicable to the AI conversation, because there are those things that enterprises are standing up,
Yep.
but there are those things out there on the internet that are popping up, or things that maybe are already in use that are now baking in flavors of AI. What are your recommendations for folks around that? Because I don't know about you, but I dealt with a number of sanctioned versus unsanctioned initiatives, and there's a lot of effort that goes into it initially, but you're never done, right? It's an ongoing thing because business users, and the business will be business users in the business. So where do you suggest folks start in understanding what is their true AI real estate?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, unsanctioned, in my opinion, no. Get some controls around that, right? Like, let's not have people just go and access any GPT that's out there, because there's a lot of malicious ones now too that the bad guys are running, and it's producing bad information, right, intentionally. So I think that's a piece of it. I think for me, it is call it a slow roll, or call it a guided exercise of rolling out AI, specifically generative AI, to users. So likely you've got some sort of licensing, as I mentioned earlier, through some sort of workspace suite that you've got. What I would suggest is doing it like you would deploying any other tool, right? Getting a small group to test, go through your user acceptance testing, go through your validation, roll it out in waves, right? So that way security is not getting overwhelmed and impacted. And that way you could always, kind of roll back, if you will, and take that access away. So what I would do really is start with a subset of that licensing and roll it out to some users that are known, that are trusted, and maybe those business unit leaders that we talked about, right? Get them to start using it and understanding how it's affecting what they do, and getting all of the information from it and making sure it's all valid and all of those things. So I would start with a subset and then waterfall that approach and slowly roll it out and make sure that all of that testing and validation is done. I think we said before we started here, Ward, due diligence, right? Making sure we're performing our due diligence as security. Because I think a lot of times we're considered the bad guy, right? We're the one that's preventing work from being done, right? And that's not the case. That's not what we're trying to do. We just want to secure the data so that way the data can continue to be used, right? So I'm a firm believer in a methodical approach, and making sure you understand who it's being rolled out to, and getting validation from the business that things are successful.
Love it. While you were talking, though, I thought of I guarantee, maybe there's some listeners that people fall into, but I guarantee there's organizations out there. What if the boat is already sailed, right? What if the business moved faster to security? Congratulations, AI is there and being used, and now there's a CISO, or data security leader, not sleeping because it's there, and now what are they going to do about it? What should folks do?
Yeah, I think, and I think most customers are in this boat. I've only talked to a few that are, doing the methodical approach and are kind of starting at a small scale, right? A lot of people have just turned it on, and now they're going, uh-oh, what do we do, right? So pull the plug, just go dark completely. I'm completely kidding.
And everyone just turned off the episode, Craig. No one's listening now.
Yeah. No, I mean, it goes back to that audit again, right? Whether you have already deployed generative AI or starting to, or whatever the case may be, getting an audit of that data is going to be critical. Because once you have that audit of that data and you know who has access, then you can start putting in those access controls so everyone can't just query whatever. Now, when it comes to unsanctioned things, you got to have other controls and other tooling in place to prevent that, right? Which is all available. There's stuff out there on the market that can help you do that. But that's really going to be a complete cutoff, right? Like, we're not going to have unsanctioned Gen AI in our environment, because who knows what information it's going to pull back. Not to mention, how good is everyone at pulling out relevant data and only feeding the GPT, the LLM, that relevant data? Or are you feeding it all of the data? And so now it's got all sorts of PII and PHI and you name it. How many things are you avoiding from a regulatory perspective or
old data
compliance perspective, or old data, like we talked about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like if we go and query who is the field CTO of Infolock, and it says, John Smith, it's wrong, right? So we got to make sure that we're, cutting that piece out of it. A lot of people use various GPTs in their personal life and get information and stuff like that. I still think personally there's some access control issues there that we're never going to solve because everybody and their mom has access to it. But I think really that audit's going to be a big piece to really. And when I say audit, I don't mean like auditor, like third party auditor. I just mean like a validation of what that data estate looks like, right? Because then once we get that validation, then we can start taking steps back, if you will, to control and limit what people can do. Because I'm not a believer by any means of word that we should turn off generative AI for users. Again, I think there's really good reasons to use it. Make an email sound a lot better than I can write it, or give me some good information that is relevant to a slide deck that I'm building that's got some good statistics, right? We want to make sure that that information that's getting put out there is valid, right? And so if we know that that information is valid within our business, we can then start putting those access controls in place to be able to only allow people to query the data that they need to query, instead of getting access to everything and it being the wild, wild west, if you will.
So we've talked a lot about business and AI and LLMs and all that. I'm curious your thoughts. I'm seeing a trend, and pretty sure you guys probably are too. There's more and more security companies bringing AI into their tools. One that I saw, oh man, a year, maybe closer to 2 years ago, are folks starting to bring generative-ish AI capabilities into like SOC tooling, right? So, the whole, selling point, at least as I understood it, would be, something would happen and the AI model could propose that based on what it's seeing, the analyst should then do X, Y, or Z, right? Instead of having to do some of the menial tasks. So one, first, what are your thoughts there? And then the second is, what are your thoughts around securing that? Because now we've got the watchers also looking at this, and I'm a big fan of, who's watching the watchers.
And no one.
Yeah, AI is.
Yeah, no, yeah, AI is watching itself, right? It's the phrase "the fox guarding the henhouse," right? Like I think we use that statement in security all the time, because you don't want the fox guarding the henhouse, right? So I don't know that I have a really solid answer for solving it, honestly, Ward, because I think it's that piece of it specifically, like around security operations, has absolutely just gone 100x in no time. And so now it's like you almost have to use something like that specifically around security operations and incident response. And I think, and customer service too, don't forget that one. Because I think what we're doing as an industry is we're trying to, I won't say eliminate level one, right? But we're definitely trying to level everybody up, right? A level one analyst can become a level two or a level three or an incident responder or, security ops, whatever the case may be. And so we're trying to take, as you said, some of those menial or mundane tasks out. And so that's where we introduce that agentic AI or AI driven outcomes, right? And so I'm all for it as long as we understand what it's querying, right? And what it's doing and what access it has to. So again, at any point in this conversation, you notice I've kind of pivoted back to it all's down to access. Who has access to those data repositories and those data sets to be able to then, do something potentially nefarious with that generative AI client now, right? So I don't know that I could solve it because, as you mentioned, there's so many tools that have come out with it, right? I think it's the way forward for security operations, especially to do that kind of initial triage, if you will, right? Not having to have eyes on glass, 24/7, but you do have eyes on glass 24/7 because you're using AI, right? And leveraging automation. So it's all back to access for me. Solving it, I think, is going to be tough just because everyone's using it now, right? So how do we put the guardrails in place? How do we rein it in and control it rather than saying, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do everything, this old way, if you will. We will leverage AI. We will do those things, but we really want to control how that is giving us the information, right? Because taking 100 threats in a SOC, been there, done that, and giving it, one single output that you can go, hey, let me go do this. way better than trying to piece that together. My brain can't piece together 100 alerts and figure out what the commonality is, but guess what? AI can, right? So leverage it in the right way. I just think we got to be cautious in how we're deploying that. Again, going back to testing, user acceptance testing, piloting, all of those things, the basics that we all know, we just got to make them our everyday now, right? It's not basics anymore. It is just something we have to do now.
And I would say validating the output, right? I think that's huge. You talked a lot about access, and usually when I think about access, that's the first piece, right? And I was actually reading an article on LinkedIn where there was a consulting organization that is getting their hands slapped, right? They ended up using an AI to produce an output, and the output wasn't accurate, and now they're giving money back to that client. It's very public, so definitely want to make sure that. And I agree with you, right? AI, I didn't use it a lot, a couple of years ago. Um, I don't use it all the time now, admittedly, but oh my goodness, have I found some usages where I look back and say, "Shoot, I wish I would have had it when I was making those huge spreadsheets or when I was making that PowerPoint instead of let's go to the Google engine, let's go look for the stats or the imagery or whatever the exact things that I want."
Yeah. Yeah. I think too, the output is a big piece because if you go and ask a GPT to write you a Python script, I would hope that you're not going to just go deploy it, right? Like, again, get back to the basics, go validate what it is, right? Sure, let it write it for you, but you should have the knowledge to be able to then go parse through it and make sure that it's legitimate and real and it's going to actually work, and then go through that testing phase, right? And I'm not saying people are doing that they're going and asking a GPT to create something for them and it's just now, the gospel. It is the thing, and everyone's got to, understand that. I think there's definitely some ebb and flow with it, and so you definitely have to validate that output of what it's actually producing.
People are getting the prompt. People are copying and pasting, and it's going right in. I mean, a story. This is an older story now. I don't know how many years ago, but I always go back to it and laugh. The story was around, somebody asked AI, how do I keep my cheese from sliding off the pizza when I make it, right? And the AI, the GPT happened to look at a Reddit post where somebody jokingly said, use glue, right? And that was the output, right? Use glue on your pizza, that'll keep your cheese from leaving. And like I said, it's old now. I'm sure I think I mentioned on the podcast before, but I laugh every time because right? That somebody saw that and said, "Oh, then they went and Googled or asked GPT, what's non-toxic glue? I'm going to go use that." Like,
Yeah. Well, it's like the tag on a blow dryer. I talk about this all the time. The reason there's a tag on the blow dryer that says don't put it in water is because somebody did it, right? The reason why we have warnings, the reason why we're told not to do these things, somebody made the mistake. And so now these companies have to issue these warnings and put these tags on and all that kind of stuff. It's the same thing with AI, right? We need to issue a warning to say, hey, you need to validate what you're getting out of it. Because if you're not validating it, you're running blind, right? At some point, you're not getting accurate information, or you think you are, but you're actually saying this is truth when you don't really know, right? So yeah, validation of that output is going to be critical, both internally within your business, making sure that that LLM is querying your data set around your data and producing information for your users that's relevant to the business. Whereas, something external, we talked about an unsanctioned GPT, right? It's going to give you information from all over the place, from how it was trained, right? How that large language model was trained and who trained it, right? So validating that output's going to be pretty critical to be able to be successful in securing AI successfully.
man, love it. Kraig, it's clear that you have had these conversations a time or two, with clients, but also just chatting with you, not only in this episode, but before, right? Some of our other conversations. It's very clear you've been around the block a time or two. You've got a lot of experience. So, very curious. What was your journey to becoming the field CTO at Infolock?
Yeah. Well, I started out early after my first stint in college, in IT. Cyber wasn't really a thing per se, right? Antivirus, maybe people had some proxies, right? But security was pretty rudimentary. And so I got into IT, worked in some call centers, doing help desk, doing desktop. How probably a lot of us got started, right, in our journey. And then at a point in the 2010s, 20 teens, I guess, I got asked by several people that I knew because I'd been buying technology through vendors and resellers. Hey, why don't you come sell? And I was like, no, 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 no.
Ooh, go to the dark side.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, no, I'm a practitioner. Like I'm used to this. Like I know what I'm doing. I know what, my modus operandi looks like, right? For a security administrator, security manager, whatever the case may be at the time. And working through both partners as an MSSP, as well as direct with clients, right? And so I went, okay, let me take a shot at it. Let me see what happens. And honestly, the rest is history because I absolutely fell in love with being a sales engineer, which now being a field CTO, I am effectively a glorified sales engineer. Some people call us SE in a sport coat, right? So, that's really how I got here. As a practitioner, and then I was an SE, and now with Infolock, a company that I've worked with for many years now. And it was the right fit at the right time for both parties. But really be able to take that next iteration for myself professionally as more of a thought leader. Something I was always doing as an SE, and I'm sure many people will listen to this podcast and go, yep, Kraig did that. I was the SE that always raised my hand, right? I wanted to present at a conference. I wanted to teach a workshop. I wanted to do those things around thought leadership and how do we be successful going forward, less hands-on keyboard, developing policy and deploying technology, right? And so that's really where I've gotten to, and how I've gotten here is just kind of step by step, taking it, jumping from lily pad to lily pad, making sure it's the next move, not only professionally for myself, but obviously for my family as well. So the big key to that, Ward, as you know, is networking. I think that being able to establish a brand for yourself, know who you are as a security professional, and being able to really tout that brand and build your network of people really gets you where you want to be. Cyber is full of certifications, and those are awesome and great and get you a lot of good information. But there's just a lot about being ingrained in the community, understanding who other security practitioners are, who other security sellers are, and just creating that group for yourself that you can lean on, get feedback from. In fact, I just literally took a phone call last night from a former colleague, just wanted to ask me some questions, right, about where I've gotten to and how I've gotten here, right? So I think that it's not everyone's journey, and I think my journey is somewhat unique a little bit, just because I did go, practitioner and MSSP to the vendor side and partner side. So, but I've always been a partner guy. I've always been in the channel. That's always been something that I've seen as a critical piece in success of both the vendors and the customers, is having that kind of that middle ground and that middle person to kind of keep everybody in check, if you will, right? Making sure that everybody's doing everything they should be, right? Because the way that we have built our process in getting from vendor to customer can be a little ebb and flowy sometimes, right? And so I thoroughly enjoy that process and being able to be ingrained with the both the customers and the vendors. And so I found an absolute great place, not only to work in Infolock, but in a place that I'm at professionally too, being a field CTO and being able to be more strategic with customers. My conversations aren't always about which tool do you deploy, as I mentioned earlier, right? My conversations are more why, right? Why are we doing this? How do you think we should do this? This is how I think we should do this, right? And really being theoretical, and then allowing those practitioners to come in behind me and actually, do a lot of that work that I did at one point, and I know you did as well, Ward. So, it's just iterative. It's ongoing and continual to keep your brand alive, keep that network alive, and be able to take the next step that's right for you.
Awesome. I'm gonna put you on the spot here. Um,
Uh-oh.
yeah, I'm gonna put you on the spot, and I didn't prep you on this. I did that on purpose. So, again, you've been in the space, bringing it back to data security. We've been talking about data security the whole time, but honing in on data security now. We are about to go into Q4, which means 2026 is right around the corner. Do you have any predictions for what 2026 is going to bring in the data security realm?
I don't know if it's 2026, but I think we're getting closer to it. And people, I think, are going to laugh when they hear this, because I say this to people all the time, but I think things are going to start coming back on-prem. I think SaaS and the cloud is good for certain things, but I think there is a significant portion of what a lot of businesses do that I think the cost savings was the kind of the original talking point there. But there's so much overhead and workflow that has to happen in order to secure that why not put it in our own data center? So it is a conversation I've had even recently. Again, I don't know if it's in 26 that it's going to happen, but I do think we're going to start seeing some on-prem things start happening again. People are going to start kind of being cyclical and bring that back. If you think about it, our industry is always cyclical, right? We are going to always come back around to something. So I think we're getting close to that. But for actual 26, I think that I don't think it's a trend. I just think what we're going to see specifically around generative AI and AI security, they're going to start getting, and they already are, they're going to start getting embedded with larger vendors, if you will, right? So your AI only companies are going, and AI security only companies are going to become part of bigger platforms, riding alongside all of your normal security stack of whoever you buy that through or from, right? So it becomes just another part of the security stack. And it's a pretty critical part for most vendors now to be able to offer to their customers. So I think that that's going to be a big piece, is really seeing AI become part of the bigger security portfolio and that security stack. So I think we're going to see some AI vendors starting to get gobbled up, if you will, by some of the big guys.
Yeah, I like that. I also like. I agree. The back on prem. That's an interesting prediction. I too have thought the same thing. Although I thought this probably 5 to 6 years ago. So I'm kind of at that stage now where it's like, it's not going to happen, right? The ship has sailed. But interesting. Going back on prem. I think just kind of further what your thoughts there. I feel like if that happens, there's going to be an interesting, almost shake up or maybe even new vendors that appear on the scenes when that happens, right? Folks that have abandoned on-prem all of a sudden going back, or folks that never fully went cloud are saying, "Hey, we're back. Remember us?" Very interesting. Well, Kraig, yeah, absolutely. So if folks want to connect with you or find you, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, LinkedIn, honestly, Kraig with a K. You can't spell it wrong now. Kraig Faulkner on LinkedIn. You can look up Infolock as well, and be able to go that way. But LinkedIn's definitely my main place. Never been much of a Twitter or X guy, so I've got one out there, but you won't see much on it. So LinkedIn's definitely the best place for me.
Awesome, perfect. And I think you mentioned earlier you've got a blog coming out soon.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me. Yeah, I am in process of writing a blog. I've got kind of a first half draft, if you will, so working on it still. Hopefully, in the next few weeks, will be coming out via Infolock. essentially what I'm writing about is exactly what we talked about today. Just going into more detail, finite detail on the access piece of artificial intelligence, right? So yeah, look forward to that. Look forward to that getting published here soon, and hopefully look out for it on LinkedIn too.
Perfect. So there you go, folks. If you want to learn more about this topic, find Kraig, follow him, and be on the lookout for that blog post. So, Kraig, thank you for joining. This is a long time coming. I'm glad we finally met up. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey man, travels for me, travels for you. We finally got the time to sync up. So this is exciting, and hopefully in a year or so, maybe less, we do this again after you get through your running list of people of backlog, you know.
Absolutely. And big thank you to the audience. Really hope you enjoyed the episode and learned something today. Please tell others to follow, listen, and continue to check in on us. This has been another exciting episode of Guardians of the Data. See you next time. That's a wrap on another episode of Guardians of the Data. Thanks for tuning in. For show notes and more, visit guardiansofthedata.show. Guardians of the Data is made possible by support from Centro. To see how we help organizations discover and classify all of their data accurately and automatically while quickly achieving petabyte-scale data protection without the fuss, please visit centro.io. Catch you next time.